Where to begin? Where to begin? Well, I think actually this morning I'm going to break one of the fundamental rules of preaching, and I'm going to tell you the point first, and not talk for half an hour leading up to whatever that point may be. And the point is this. I write a blog and do a little reflection video each week, which I post. And early, very, very early Saturday morning, I got this message. Your latest blog post got me to think about my understanding of God. Here it is. I'm not going to actually tell you what it is because I think the person who sent me this message, that's theirs to tell, not mine. But that is the point. Not that they have one, by the way, which is a very, really nice, concise, one-sentence way lesson, my 30 words. Really nice, concise understanding. I think I really like it. Again, it's not mine to tell, though. But that actually isn't the point. The point is thinking about it. If we are asking ourselves a question, how do we understand God? The very first thing you want to do is wonder about that question that you're asking. Who is God for me? How is God for me? What is God for me? What do I mean by God? There are so many things that make that question so complicated that you can't possibly just have a simple answer. You can't. What you can do is say, I think this. But then you're going to have to unpack that, aren't you? And so a very simple, very concise, one sentence or one paragraph answer to that question is absolutely possible. But it needs to take into consideration what you mean by all of those words. What do all of those words mean to you? How am I hearing that? What do they mean to me? The real point is having to struggle with that and think about it. And that we do that on a regular basis, not just once and kind of go, oh, well, that's it, I've solved it. But to come back to it and come back to it and come back to it. And of course we do, because as we're going to sing in the last hymn this morning, God never changes. What is true and right, what is love, what is grace, what is all of the things that you might describe God with. But we do. We do change. We grow. We experience things. We live. So it's important to come back to that and come back to that and come back to that on a regular basis. Because the really important thing, very much like what this message is not where we're getting to, it's how we're getting there. Jacob is quite possibly one of, as far as I'm concerned, the least likable characters in Scripture. Remember Jacob and Esau? He stole the blessing from Esau. Then he tries to make a deal with Laban to marry the daughter that he wants to marry, and Laban tricks him, and there's a whole backstory to Jacob that would not ever make you think this is the guy who's going to father the tribes of Israel. But he does. And on the way to that, part of his journey is that he finds himself stuck between the vengeful brother and the vengeful father-in-law. And here he is by himself. And he has this experience where he quite literally appears to wrestle with God. The story itself is actually really kind of interesting too, because not only does it appear in the end, does it appear as though he has wrestled with God, or an entity, a being representing God, but he appears to have won In fact, he appears to be winning. In fact, he appears to be winning, and God cheats, intentionally injures him in order to win, and yet still doesn't, because Jacob perseveres. He sticks with it and won't let go. And God renames him Israel. And his future is changed. Jacob is changed. And that's the point of the story, I think, isn't it? We see competition as there must be a winner and a loser. And in this competition, it'd be really easy to interpret this as God was losing, so God cheated, but still didn't manage to win. Had to acknowledge that Jacob won. Jacob beat God. That's not the point. The point is wrestling with God and being changed as a result. That's why we need to do this. How do we understand God? What is God for us? Who is God? Why we need to do that. Because our relationship with God isn't a competition in which there must be a winner and a loser. It's a relationship. It's a relationship through which we are changed, we are transformed. So how do we do that? How do we do that? Well, earlier in the learning together today, Deanna talked about different ways that we image God for us. Bearing in mind, of course, very carefully using the word image, right? It's one of the commandments, no graven images. So when we talk about images for God, we are simply talking about the manner in which we might understand God. We are not creating an image of God, a statue, a creative piece, however, it's about the understanding part. It's not about, well, now we've made God. It's really important, I think, to make that distinction and to wonder about that as well, because quite often we are really good at making God in our own image rather than the other way around. And it's this struggle to understand God that helps us understand how we are imaged in God, not how God is in our image. So how do we do that? How do we get there? How do we get to that understanding? What are some of the ways that we do that? Particularly if you want to be able to articulate it, right? If you want to be able to say, this is what I think God is. And I frequently say things like, I think that God is that, however you understand God, I think that God is that power in the universe, that source of life, that force, if you like, of life in the universe, that is not only in us, but is in all created things and is life-giving. And because it's life-giving, it is good. God is good. And the way that we experience that, if we are experiencing that wholly, we are experiencing that in mind, body, and spirit. That's the goal, is for us to experience it in that whole way. And from it, to see that what that power really is love. And love again is one of those words where you got to unpack that, because it's that the kind of love that is God. It's grace and care, it's understanding, it's openness to learning and growing, it's openness to each other, to relationships, it's openness to seeing that same energy, force, creativeness, power that is God in each other and in the world around us. We're all going to use different language because we all understand language differently. Even as we say, even as the church itself creates statements of faith, and we do. In fact, I would say one of the things I like most about the United Church, there's a list of things I like most about the United Church, but one of those things is that when the United Church was created in 1925, there was a statement of faith. There was a basis for union, in which were statements made about what we believe. And then there was another one later on. And then there was another one later on. And then there was another one later on. And then there was a new creed, which is my favorite one. And then more recently, we've had another statement of faith, which is quite lengthy. Some of them are quite short. Some of them are quite long. The point is there were many. In other words, we didn't just go, this is what the church believes, always. We went, let's think about that again. Let's think about that some more. Let's keep thinking about it. Let's keep re-engaging that. And you know what? If you are part of a faith tradition that made an initial statement of faith hundreds of years ago, and that's what you've stuck with, good for you. Please do keep revisiting it, though. That's the important part. And if it's still valuable and still meaningful, stick with it. Absolutely. In fact, I am sure there are people who are part of the United Church of Canada who look back at some of those earlier statements of faith and go, you know what, that is a little bit more familiar to me, a little bit more meaningful to me than some of the more recent things. Okay, the point is that you went there and you found the expression of God that connected with you, that you connected with. And there's a relationship there. The thing about all of those statements, though, and this is one of the reasons why I like the new creed so much, is that it's a fairly concise statement of faith, but it allows for how you might understand that. You don't just kind of go, we all agree that it means absolutely, literally this. It can't. It can't literally be that. Because each of us will hear it, interpret it, know it from our own experience, our own understanding of what those words mean, our own knowledge, our own experience of God in the world. Those are the tools that help us understand. So the first step is, if you are using the language of church, of those statements of faith, if you are using the language of your community of faith, your tradition, first of all, by the way, tradition means it's still meaningful. It doesn't mean that you simply say it over and over and over again and it will eventually mean something. It means tradition is something that you keep doing because it's meaningful. It speaks to you. So if you are using the language of your tradition, you still need to keep revisiting it to still see that you understand it the same way. This, especially for clergy in the United Church, there's this wonderful expression that I like and keep repeating frequently, essential agreement. Clergy in the United Church are required to be in essential agreement with the basis of union. And I interpret that, see, there we are, already interpreting. I interpret that as meaning whatever those words are, I can understand that in a way that keeps me connected to what is essentially at the heart of that. However I interpret those words. So I might see words that I don't particularly care for, but I can understand them in a certain way. And I can reach agreement with that, understanding with that. If we aren't prepared to do that, then we aren't prepared to acknowledge that we as individuals have an individual connection with God as well as a communal one. And we have to have, because if God is in all of creation and God is in each of us, and we are still unique individuals, we are connected, and yet we are unique. What creates real community is that we bring who we uniquely are to it, and that affects the community as a whole. It brings something to it, as well as us just fitting in, or as well as us gaining something from the community. It's our uniqueness that is part of that. That's true of our experience of God, too, right? Which is another way that we can find language or understanding of who God is for us. How do we experience God? What do we feel about God? How do we experience God in the world around us? Images of nature is another one. Images of God alive in creation. how the flowers grow, how the leaves are not currently green, but you know what I mean. We see God in nature, in the beauty and wonder of it, of the cosmos, the universe, all of this language that we use. Again, we need to keep constantly revisiting that, wondering constantly about it. Because as we experience life, as we grow and our life experience expands, we might come to understand things differently. What must be at the heart of all of that is the understanding of God as, I think, as a creative, life-giving force in the world, in the universe, in all of creation. And that's love, that's good. That's, to quote Genesis, it is good. Whatever language we are using, whatever feeling, whatever sense we have of our understanding of God, is unique to us. We can find ourselves in agreement with others, and we can find language that we can share. The thing is, we can also very quickly find that as being divisive. These are my words, those are your words, so clearly we are not the same. Are you sure about that? Are you sure? Because just because we're using different language doesn't necessarily mean we disagree. Perhaps what we're disagreeing at is the language, not what we mean. And meaning is what we're after. In fact, if you want to phrase that, however you want to phrase that question, if you want to phrase it as, what does God mean to you? How is God? Who is God? What is God? What about the word God even? The question itself is so complicated. You can surely come up with an answer, and yet you still need to unpack that. You still need to be prepared to say, these are my words. This is how I understand those words. So your initial statement that's really concise and clear might then need to be accompanied by, a 10,000-word essay, or experience, or life, or feeling, or understanding. The point is, very much like Jacob, we wrestle with it. And we are changed by it. It's not a question of winning the wrestling match. It's a question of finding change and transformation and understanding in the action of doing it. That's also one of the reasons why, of the two versions of the story of how Jesus acquired those first 12 followers, I like John's. I like that the way John tells the story, it was really just Jesus saying, come and see. Not commanding that they follow, but an invitation to come and see. And once you've seen, decide. If you see something that is meaningful and connects with you, that builds a relationship, be part of that. Sometimes I think the story that the other three Gospels tell of Jesus calling the first fishermen by simply saying, follow me, and they drop everything and do. We sometimes, I think, start to hear that as, God commands, I shall follow. God invites. God invites because God invites relationship. That's the ideal. To be in relationship with God, with each other, with how we see God in each other, how we see God in the world. It's the thing that connects us. Maybe that's part of how we understand God too. It's not just about how God is for me, but how God is in a way that connects me with the world. It's not just about how God is for this particular church, this particular denomination, this particular faith tradition, but how that can connect us to the world and to each other. There will always be moments of mystery. There will always be moments of wonder and understanding. There will always be moments where, despite how hard we want to have the certainty of a perfect answer, it's already there in the perfectness which is each of us, just uniquely who we are. That too is God. Not just that we were all connected, but that we are all who we uniquely are, and that is enough for our relationship